Welcome to So-and-So, brought to you by Bernina, Made to Create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to enjoy a casual conversation with a special member of the sewist and quilting community. A conversation about how they got started, what inspires them, what excites them, and their connection to this community. Today, we welcome quilt artist Barbara Ann McCraw. Actually, we welcome her back, as we met Barbara in person and interviewed her at the National Quilt Museum in Paducah at her exhibit Life Stories during Quilt Week in 2024. While our conversation was a component of a compilation of stories, we felt she had so much more to share, hence she joins us today. Barbara grew up on the south side of Chicago and later attended Illinois State University, where she earned a degree in English. In 1986, she also earned a degree in medical technology and worked at Texas Women's University, University of North Texas, and UT Southwestern Medical Center, where she became pathology supervisor until she retired in 2000. Barbara's quilts have won numerous awards, and many now make their home in private collections. They've been featured in multiple publications and featured in a documentary and a CBS television human interest story. In 2012, Barbara was invited to teach in Tanzania, Africa, and 2 years later, she returned there to participate in a quilt honoring Nelson Mandela. Barbara gives large credit for her success to her husband, Ernie, who has helped her both personally and professionally throughout her quilting career. Barbara and Ernie make their home in Texas. Barbara, welcome back to So-and-So.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful to hear your voice again. We so enjoyed meeting you in Paducah and seeing your work in person. So when we talk about this today, I have personally experienced this, and this is going to be fun talking to you again. So thank you.
Of course.
So let's start out with talking about how you learned how to sew and who influenced you.
Well, the first thing I can think of is that I was influenced by my mom a lot and also by my own creativity. I grew up in a family house with, well, there were six of us to start with, and I was the second to the youngest. But I was very quiet and shy. My other brothers and sisters were loud and rambunctious and very forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of hung in the background. I loved art and anything that had to do with making things. And so that was where that initial innate, if you want to call it that, part of me that wanted to just do something creative.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I got old enough, I think I was in seventh grade, and a lady two doors down, she wanted to know if I would babysit. And we were just standing on the sidewalk outside the houses. And I said, yes, of course. And so the night that I went over there, I walked in and she had a sewing machine. And I was flabbergasted. And I know that doesn't sound weird. I mean, it probably sounds weird, but I really, really was. And I had always wanted to sew and to be able to make something bigger than the things that I had made before with just a hand needle and thread and other things. And so I said, Mrs. Anderson, if you will teach me how to sew, I will babysit for free. And she thought that was a really great deal. And she said, well, let's shake on it to make sure. But the thing is that I never had anyone in my family that sewed at all. My mother could sew by hand. And the only thing I ever saw her make was a pleated skirt. She made it out of brown and plaid, a pink material. And she laid it out on the floor and gathered the pleats up by hand. And it was all done by hand. She didn't own a sewing machine. So I have to attribute Mrs. Anderson with teaching me how to sew.
And we are grateful for Mrs. Anderson. We are. Now your mother was a big influence to you on many levels, and we'd like to know a little bit more about her.
Well, like I said, my family was really big and uh, very forward, loud, and opinionated. And I always sat in the back and didn't say very much. I was teased about that by my sisters, but it was okay with me at the time. It did make me feel good, but it was just the way it was. My mother, on the other hand, she's the one that gave me all of the confidence that I have had my entire life. She enabled me to do some of the things that I've done in my life and to really fly, to be lifted and raised above everything. And she just loved me, and she told me that she loved me. And she also, we would be places and she would say, "Oh, look at my big brown baby." And,
Mhm.
she'd be looking at me and we'd be holding hands and smiling at each other. And she did the best that she could. But like I said, she had a big family and was working, and my dad was there, but he was a very silent man.
Mhm.
Um, so, anyway, that's kind of the way that she influenced me, just by giving me courage and giving me unconditional love, and also giving me this ability, I believe, because of the courage to feel like I could fly.
Let's talk about your career. It first based on your English degree, and then you became a pathology supervisor until you retired. That was quite
Yeah,
a switch.
yeah,
Uh,
quite a journey.
so what made you switch to pathology?
Well, first of all, I never wanted to be an English teacher, which is what I majored in English for. I knew that I wanted to go to college, but it never occurred to me what I could become. And so my brothers and sisters again saying, "Well, you better find something where you can get a job." And teaching was at the time the only thing that I knew.
Mhm.
So I started out that way. And of course, there were several prerequisites. So I took them, and that was good and well and everything. But I got pregnant in I believe it was my second year, and I had to leave college.
Mhm.
And so I left, and I had my son, and I was still living at home, and just lots of babysitters anyway. But I suppose that, I don't know, I began to think about what I really wanted to do, what I wanted my life to look like.
Mhm.
And at that time, I watched television a lot, and I was always enamored with the women that wore lab coats, and I thought I'd be a doctor, you know. And so anyway, I looked into it, and I looked in all of the medical fields. I've always been one to do a lot of research. And whatever it is, if it's somebody, a friend or something that says, "Oh, I've got this problem," and I would always go home and research it. And at the time, all I had was a set of encyclopedias, and so that's what I used.
Mhm.
But I did research medical technology, and it felt like it was just perfect for me because there was little patient interaction, a very small amount, and it was more chemistry and biology and math. Some of those things I was good at, and some I wasn't.
Mhm.
I guess that's where the pathology took me. Going along with that, I spent years as a medical technologist and learning, and I had the opportunity at some point. This was after we moved from Chicago to Texas. I was working at UT Southwestern as a medical technologist, and I believe that there was a person that quit, and they did a project. It was called HPLC, which was high performance liquid chromatography. And what it did was it involved an entire day of processes just to set up for one run of patients per day. So I thought that that would be better than learning a lot of things, different things all at one time. So I loved it, and I learned it, and I became very good at it. And it just so happened that the supervisor in that department, she decided to retire, and I was asked to take over her position.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. So let's talk about your beginning to quilt and developing a love for this. How did that come about?
Well, after we moved to Texas, it was very difficult saying goodbye to my mom. And we got down here, and I guess that I was looking for people to know and things to do. I've always been a joiner, and whatever was going on, I joined. I had a lot of black friends in Chicago that had nothing to do with any of the, I don't know how to say this, maybe politically correct, but it never mattered to me if people were black or white. It was just if we interacted and we enjoyed ourselves and had fun. And so I found out that there was a group called the Newcomers Club in Carrollton, Texas. And I decided that I'm going to join them because I was lonely and needed something creative to do. And so I got involved with them, and it was wonderful. I just felt so embraced and so loved, and we just had the best time. And so they had a quilting class, and I took it. It was totally random. I could have taken other things, but I already knew how to not quilt, sorry, but crochet and knit and do cross stitch and things like that.
Hmm.
So I said, well, I'll take the quilting class. And that's kind of where that started. I
So
loved it.
so tell us about your first quilt.
My first quilt was there, and it was just a 6 block quilt that kind of taught you within the realm of those 6 blocks lots of different things. We had to hand stitch one, machine stitch another, uh, do learn how to do seam binding and quilting and the whole thing. And at the time, that was all straight stitch quilting, so I didn't learn any of the fancy stitches that I do now.
Well, you certainly evolved from that first six box quilt, and
Yeah.
you have, and I'd like to talk about the quilt that I got to experience when we met in Paducah. You walked us through that very special quilt that tells your family history.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, it's called Family Reunion. Would you describe this quilt? Tell us about it and some of the highlights of this amazingly beautiful work.
Way back, I was doing some research on ancestry.com, and I had always been interested in my great grandparents and even anything else I could find. And so I finally signed up for it, and I found them on Ancestry, and I was just really so excited. Well, I'm not going to say the next morning, but very soon after, I woke up one morning lying on my back, and on the ceiling, this has happened to me before, I had the whole interior, the center part of the quilt done,
Mm,
and it had already been drawn out for me.
wow.
And of course, I bolted out of bed and, got a pencil and paper and started uh, drawing something out. I'm not an artist, so it was very crude drawing. But what happened was I just immediately started putting it together. I wanted to use my own fabrics, whatever I had. I wasn't going to make it any way special at first. And so that's what I did. I took that inner piece with me everywhere. The inter, the inner circle are my great grandparents, and I found out that William Banks and my great grandmother, who was Peggy, I didn't know her last name at the time, but it turned out to be Peggy Phillips. They were married at the Oakdale plantation. I found out that she was the daughter of the owner of the plantation, and he was a free man of color who happened to be, he was a carpenter, so he did lots of work at different places, and I suppose that that's how they might have met. But anyway, he had to pay the owner of the plantation, I guess that would be her father, $100, and he didn't have it, of course. This was in 1872, as a matter of fact, and
Hmm.
you know that slavery it had been abolished.
Hmm.
and that was in 1865. So she really was supposed to be free, but he was charged this $100 to buy her so that he could marry her. He signed a promissory note with a minister, and I got a copy from uh, Louisiana, where Ernie and I, my husband, went to look into all of these things. And I found that promissory note, and they sent me a copy of it and the whole thing. So it was wonderful. So I have that, and he could not write. So he signed his name on the line with an X, and then the minister wrote above it to, give it sanction or whatever. So anyway, I continued this drawing, this quilt. I started looking for different things that I had that I could make this exactly the way I wanted. And I also wanted to use everything that I had learned over the years, like French knots and, of course, hand applique. I also, someone had showed me how to take a thread and actually paint it onto this soluble interfacing that you could then dissolve, and then it would just be the trees left. So all the trees are made out of that way, and trapunto and everything else. When I got finished with this quilt, I'm sorry, with the center again. When I was finished, I decided that I'm the last and oldest member of our family, and I think I would like to extend this into a legacy quilt. And so what I started doing was just kind of writing out the things that were important to me. And of course, if you've seen the quilt, there's my brothers and sisters, my grandparents, sewing machine, and pets, my mom and dad, and my granddaughter, and all of that kind of stuff on the quilt. And each block was, it was just such a journey and such a pleasure for me. And I didn't have a time limit or a time frame to complete it. So everything was just, it was a beautiful experience.
Well, I have seen this quilt firsthand in person, and it is incredibly moving and special. And I remember when
Thank you.
you walked a crowd of people through it, and I think it took you an hour to walk through everything. And it's such a beautiful story. So I would invite those sharing this conversation with us today to please take the time to look at this quilt and just absorb the stories that Barbara tells with it. It's pretty amazing.
Well, thank you so much. And while doing some of those tours, I had an exhibit, I believe it was in Houston, and I had people come up to me, and Black people, and what really threw me were there were white people that came up, and one man talked to me about, and I won't say the whole thing because it wasn't pleasant, but he said that he lived in New Jersey, and when he was a little boy, people had signs on their lawns that they didn't want certain people around, and he
Hmm.
happened to be one of those people. And I was making other people cry, and he made me cry because I really didn't understand that if you had white skin, what was the problem?
Right.
I've since learned that, but at the time I didn't understand it at all, and it just broke my heart. So I learned a lot, and I hope that other folks learned a lot. And again, it's my legacy, and 74, and when it's time for me to hit the road, I'll have that left behind.
Barbara, you talk about race issues very openly because you've lived through them personally. Um,
Yes.
Tell us about your loving quilt.
Well, my loving quilt came about as a result of Dr. Carolyn Meslumi. She is a quilt curator who she put together an organization called the Women of Color Quilters Network. I knew nothing about this, but one day she saw something of mine on the internet, and she contacted me and asked me if I'd be interested in joining this group. And what she does is she gets calls for uh, brown and black people to make these quilts, and then she puts them on exhibit. And she's pretty amazing at this. They've been the Smithsonian and the Renwick and, galleries all over, uh, not even just this country, but all over the world. And she had one that came up and it was called And Still We Rise. And I had to choose a topic. And the topic that I chose was it's an 1867 court that it unanimously declared that the Virginia's Racial Integrity Act of 1924 was unconstitutional, and it ended all race-based marriages. It actually banned that in the United States. And so this case was based on an interracial couple, Richard and Mildred Loving, and they sued the state of Virginia to make this come about. Well, because Ernie and I are an interracial couple, it really appealed to me, and so I asked her if I could have that topic, and that's where my quilt came from, the Loving Quilt. Uh, I thought about it a lot and what I wanted to do and how I wanted to make it, and I came up with a wedding bower, just a bridal bower, I guess, with flowers across the top and down the sides of it. And I just put a picture of my arm and hand and his arm and hand together, making with our fingers a heart in the center.
Hmm.
And then I told the story, some of the highlights of the actual Racial Integrity Act and how it was beaten. I told that in some of the different parts of the quilt, and I used hands that went around the edges with all different colors of hands to kind of point to this particular paragraph here and this one here and that one there, so to speak. So it actually told the story of how Mildred and Richard Loving, they were married in another state. They lived in Virginia, and so they came home. They lived in a rural area. And I found out later that rural areas in the South, there was a lot more peace and understanding between the races in those places where, if you had some extra food, you shared it. If your car didn't work, you somebody that knew how to fix a car would come over and help and things like that. So they did come home and they were fine, but one night the sheriffs came and drug them out of their bedroom and put them in jail. And they put them in jail because of they had breached this Racial Integrity Act in Virginia. So they ended up moving to a state, I can't remember, but it was in the city. And they weren't used to city life. And one of their children was hit by a car. He didn't die, but he was hurt very badly. At that point, there were some lawyers, I believe it was, federal lawyers, that got involved. And they took their case to the Supreme Court, and they eventually won that case in 1967.
Hmm. Let's talk about Ernie, your husband, one of your favorite topics to talk about, and he is a delightful human being. Um,
He
you
is.
you give large credit to him for your success as he's been with you throughout your career, both personally and professionally. Would
Yes.
you talk about him and what he's done for you in your quilting career, and more importantly, what's it like to work together?
Well, Ernie and I have been together. We've been married for 45 years this year, and we dated for 6 years. And the reason we dated so long was obviously because of our color difference. But he was born in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, but right near the Canada border. So where he was raised, there was basically no racism, no color lines up there. And so when he moved down here to Chicago, where we met, he didn't have a problem with it. And he thought I was beautiful and I thought he was wonderful. I thought he was cute, first of all. And then he was so nice and so open. And we started out, we worked for the same company. It was a B Discount. It was a beauty supply company.
Hmm.
And he was my boss at one point, but we just didn't play that down until later on when things got more serious. But we eventually got married. He adopted both of my black children, and we made a life for ourselves. Uh, Later on, I guess we had to move here. Yeah, it was here for his job here in Texas, and that's why we ended up here.
Hmm.
But Ernie's been, out of all of my crazy family goings on, he stood by me no matter what happened. I had brothers and sisters that my brother drank too much and he set my mother's house on fire and, all of this crazy stuff. And he was just always there for me. And I think the biggest thing was that when my mom passed, him being an ex hairdresser, he went down to the funeral home and he did my mother's hair and her makeup, which I've told him before how much it meant to me because I couldn't have done it. They asked me to, and I can't do that.
Hmm.
And when he did that, I guess to me, he was a knight in shining armor. And so we've had a lovely life, just all over the place. And no matter what I did, he was always there to help me. And no matter what he did, it was the same for him. I wanted to help him and be there for him. And I hear people talk about, they're sick of their husbands and this and that and the other. And it's like, I don't know. He cooks for me. He cleans. We laugh. We talk. We've been on trips together. I think it's because of him that I was able to go to Africa. I don't think he's given me the nerve, I think, and I don't know, whatever it takes to say, yeah, I can do it.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that he did for me, kind of like my mom did. It's like he gave me courage, and he gives me courage even now.
He's a keeper.
Oh, he definitely is. I'll tell you, he just suffered about 2 months ago a triple bypass,
Hmm.
and he's doing very well now. But I felt like now I can pay him back because he never wants me to do anything.
Sure.
He said, "You sew, and I'll do whatever." But anyway, he's fine. And our quilting together started out a little rocky because, everybody's different. And even though I've taught classes, every student that I've ever taught came at it or approached it differently. Some wanted it perfect, precise. Some didn't care. Some was, okay, these stitches are all right. And so I learned that with Ernie, he was more of an avant-garde off the, top of his head kind of a quilter, and it didn't make any difference if it wasn't stitched right. Me, I think having a pathology background, you work in a laboratory, and if a drop goes in the wrong test tube, you throw everything out and you start over again if it wasn't supposed to be in that test tube.
Hmm.
So it was a matter of getting used to the differences. Well, what I learned is that he became very good. As a matter of fact, he does a lot of my binding. He's an excellent uh, applicator and hand stitcher because his mother made altar cloths and they were all by hand when he was a little boy, and he would sit at the table and watch her. So anyway, we've had a good life together. We're still sewing and hanging around and having a good time together. And I love him dearly, and I think it's mutual.
Now, you mentioned your trip to Africa. You've been to Tanzania twice. The second time, the Mandela quilt. Tell us about these visits and this amazing quilt.
Well, the first time we went, we did go to Tanzania, and it was because one of the ladies in the Quilt Guild, her sister, had worked over there teaching English as a second language. She was going back, and she said, "Wouldn't it be a good idea if you ladies from the Quilt Guild some of you could come along and teach or do whatever?" And so, of course, Ernie said, "That's a great idea." And it was a huge process. I'm making this really short, but many, many of the ladies that actually took part in this, they donated things for me to go and for a couple of other ladies from the Guild to go. Ernie decided to go. One of the husbands from the ladies at the Guild, they decided to go too. So it was the two guys, and I think it was seven of us ladies that went. And what we did when we got there was because this other lady that had been before, her name was Nell. Nell had a lot of resources and knew who and where and what places to go to. And so she sort of made an itinerary for us. And we started at it was a women's resource center. And this was a huge place. And they taught young women and women that lived in the mountains, taught them how to make money. If you were a woman in Africa and you didn't earn an income, you were treated very poorly by your husband and such. And so it was thought that if these women could learn how to sew, there were others that were learning how to be waitresses in restaurants and how to just do different things that they could earn a living at. So we went down there and we decided to teach them sewing and quilting. And what we did was I came up with several patterns. One was a doll because I understood that children in Tanzania, they didn't have toys because their toys was working. They shoveled dirt or they planted bulbs or they planted food or whatever. And so the doll was one of the patterns. And then I thought, well, placemats would be a good pattern because it's something that if there's a northerner or someone from, I don't know, Europe somewhere
Hmm.
that wanted to bring something home from Africa, well, the fabric is kind of out there. But if we could take it and, calm it down a little bit and make these placemats and, maybe table runner and such, they would be able to take them and put them in their suitcases and buy them. So it was a wonderful time. We did really well, and Ernie was able to there's a local tourist place that was in Arusha, which was the biggest city near Tanzania that we could get to. He was able to get them 4 foot by 4 foot space in there for these kids to sell their goods. And it turned out wonderfully. It paid for the salary of one of them to work for an entire year and other things that were going on. So it was just great. The next time we went to Africa, we were actually in South Africa, and we went there because of the Nelson Mandela exhibit.
Hmm.
We didn't meet him because he had passed at that point, but we met his children and grandchildren, which was a real honor. We
Mm-hmm.
got to see his home where he lived. There were tours going on. And we actually went to Robben Island where we saw his cell where he was his home for 19 years. And we went out to where uh, there was this place where they picked rocks. And well, I should say they're more like stones. And they would take the pickaxes and have to break them up. And when nobody was looking, I picked up one, and you can delete this part.
We won't even
Uh,
talk about it, right?
no, I didn't say a word.
Not a peep.
But anyway, so that turned out to be a wonderful trip as
Hmm.
well. It just and again, that wouldn't have happened if Ernie hadn't said, "We can do this." And so we
Absolutely.
did, yeah. My quilts have been all over the place. I didn't go to France, but I've had quilts over there. We went to England. We had some over there in Birmingham and uh, just all over. And by virtue of Dr. Maslumi, my quilts have been to Japan and other countries that she sent them to. And I've just had a wonderful time with them.
Very
I'm
well
very,
traveled.
yeah, very grateful.
You were involved in something called the Names Project in 1995.
Oh, yes, I was.
Yes, you were. Would you tell us about that?
Yes. When I stopped working at the lab, I started volunteering at a place called AIDS Services of North Texas. And this was a place that was trying to help uh, folks that had AIDS or were sick or whatever. And they needed some help in the laboratory. And I thought, well, this is great. This is what I do. And when I worked in the hospitals, many people didn't want to go to the rooms to take blood from these patients. And so I said, well, I'll do it. And so I did that at 8 services. Well, one day when I was getting ready to leave, I heard a group of folks laughing in one of the other rooms, and I stuck my head in and I said, hello, what are you guys doing? Which is what I normally do when I want to join a group. And they said, oh, we're sewing. And I said, are you kidding? I said, what is this for? So they told me about the Names Project and that these were 3 foot by 6 foot quilts that they make for friends and family that had passed from AIDS. And they made them, this was a requisite, I get a prerequisite, that they make them that size because they were the size of a coffin. And many younger people probably don't know this,
Mm,
but working in the beauty business, as Ernie and I were, we were both very much involved and lost a lot of our friends.
mhm,
So uh, I started going to the Quilt Guild, and that's how I got started with quilting, in earnest. And while I was going to the guild, and while I was drawing blood at the 8 services, I found out about this names project. As I said, well, two of the board members there, uh, their their names were Rick and Teal Sale. Turns out that he was a professor emeritus for the University of North Texas, and she wrote the art textbook. They had a son. His name was Ricky, and Ricky had died of AIDS. He was actually an actor in New York. And so meeting them and getting to know them, they're in their 90s now. And they would have us for lunch probably once or twice a week. We got to be really close. So I told Ernie, I said, I want to make Ricky a quilt for the Names Project. Well, Teal was an artist herself, and I took one of her lino cuts, which is what she specialized in, and I turned it into a 3 by 6 foot quilt for Ricky. And when I presented it to them, I can't tell you how emotional it was.
mhm.
Well, we had another friend that was going to Washington, and we all met for dinner one night, and she told Rick and Teal that she was going to take the quilt and have it inaugurated, so to speak, into the Names Project. And I didn't know anything about that. I just thought it was a quilt that they would keep, but I was thrilled when it would be going there. And it turned out to be, again, a wonderful circumstance. Her name was Sandy, and she sent us pictures of when it was inducted and the whole thing. And so
Mhm.
it's there to this day.
How has quilting influenced your life? And it is so special to you. Why is that?
Well, I think it's because it was a way for me to express myself. As I mentioned before, that I was the quiet, nerdy kid in the household and the deep thinker and thought very poorly of myself. And it just sort of brought me to a place where I could experience this joy in knowing and meeting people that really liked me. And and I know that probably sounds kind of childish, but I don't think you ever get over feeling like you don't belong and then finding a place where you do belong. And so that's what quilting did for me. The first time I walked into a quilt meeting, I was the only Black woman in the whole hall, and there were probably 75 women. I was treated like a sister and a mom and a aunt or whatever. I was treated like family, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how kind these ladies were. And I think that that's what drew me and kept me quilting. And I think in keeping me quilting, I was able to let myself go and develop the style and the thoughts and the things that I wanted to express with my stories, with my quilts. So it's meant my life to me.
Barbara, what's next for you? And what's your dream?
Y- You know what? I feel like I'm living the dream. I really do. I don't feel like there's anything next that I want to do. Right now I'm working on a quilt for the city of Burleson, Texas. I won a contest where, actually, Ernie submitted the entries, and it was a company that wanted to highlight the city's arts. And so we were chosen, or actually, it was me. It had to be one person, but I told him I'd share the money with him. So anyway, I've been working on a quilt, and he did some barn quilts actually, which were painted, uh, 4 by 4 foot painted structures that will go around the city when it's time to present the quilt. The quilt will hang in City Hall, and I'm really excited about it. Actually, I'm binding it as we speak.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, but I don't have any. I'm at that age where, you know, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't really want to do anything. I don't need anything else. I just want to continue to quilt. I love quilting. It's been my life. It's been my joy, and it's been everything to me. And if I had never entered a contest, and I wouldn't have if it hadn't been for one of the lady friends in Denton, and she said, "Barb, if you don't enter your quilt in the Dallas Quilt Show, I will enter it for you." And I said, "Yeah, I'll do that one of these days." And sure enough, she brought me an entry form and made me fill it out.
Uh-huh.
And that was where it all started. I wasn't interested in showing quilts or doing anything. I just wanted to make them.
In our conversation today, is there any question I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
No, I think we've covered almost everything, and since I talk so much, I I probably gave you a lot more information than you even needed. But no, not at all. You've covered everything.
Well, you have wonderful things that you've shared with us today, and it has been so
Thank you.
terrific to reconnect with you again.
Me too. Me too. I'm so happy this happened.
Me too, and certainly our best to Ernie because he was integral in making this happen. So our thanks to him
Absolutely.
too.
I will do that. And I thank you so much for choosing me. I think this is wonderful, and I feel kind of nervous probably because it's like I okay, I'll have to tell you, I didn't even know what a podcast was.
And now you do, and now you've done one.
I know. How about
How
that?
about that?
Thank you, Meg. Thank
Oh,
you
thank
a
you.
million times. And
Now, is our listeners might want to reach out to you. What's the best
yes.
way for them to do that? How can they get a hold of you?
Well, I do have a website, and it's www.quiltasart.com, and that's quilt singular, not plural.
Okay. All right. Quiltasart.com. Barbara,
Yes.
thank you again for joining us today. It has been special.
Thank you so much, and absolutely the same to you. Your voice is like an angel's.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
There you have it. Another story about someone just like you, someone for whom sewing and quilting is so much more than a hobby. It is a way of life and a connection to something bigger. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to meg@soandsopodcast.com or complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to, review, and rate this podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website, soandsopodcast.com, for more information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I want to thank Bernina for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.